Okay.
I just did that, sir. So you'll be able to share your screen now.
Okay, let me try and see. Okay, yeah. Let me just put that up.
Okay, perfect. We can see your screen, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so how's everyone doing?
Sir, we're fine. You're doing great, sir.
Okay, how many people are in the class, by the way? How many people do you have?
We're supposed to be about 15 persons now, but I can just see 5 persons.
Okay. No, it's not really time yet, so I'm pretty sure they probably will be here by the time it's by the time the class is supposed to start. So which classes, I mean,
Yes,
which
sir,
which topics have taken place so far?
Okay, we've had a couple of topics. We've had yeah, we've had a couple of others.
Okay.
Let me just go over our activity chart so I'm sure that I don't make any mistake concerning the titles of the lecture. Okay, sir, we've had the basis of sports radio presentation. Please turn off your mic. Whose mic is on? Okay. All right, sir, we've had the basis of sports radio presentation. We've had television as a critical tool for mass communication. We've had becoming the quintessential journalist. We've had the role of journalists as nation builders. We've had ethics of journalism. We've had mass communication from the perspective of a non-professional. We've had critical media literacy. Yeah, and then the tips on how to work your way in and stay up. That's all we've had now.
Good. So which ones would you say are the ones that you recollect, the ones that you really remember? Because that's quite a lot.
Yes, that's quite a lot. But I noticed from the course of these lectures that we've had so far, most of the lecturers say almost the same thing as regards tips on how to be a good journalist or how to be a media presenter and all. So most of the topics, these topics rather, are connected. Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
I mean, that should be the case. I think I will be worried if they are completely disconnected. There are going to be slight differences across the board, but the great thing is that they have to share so many things in common.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
That's a good thing. Okay. So
sir.
Okay, are you ready? Okay.
Yes, it's almost time for the class, and before the class starts, I would want to introduce you to my classmates.
Okay.
Before the lecture commences. So good afternoon, everybody. Our lecturer here today is Dr. Chuka Onwumechili. He's an experienced professor of communications with a demonstrated history of working with the higher education industry. He has over 40 years experience in the media and communications space. He's an editor of the Howard Journal of Communications, and he also serves on the editorial board of Communication and Sports Journal. He has authored and co-edited over 10 books and published in several academic journals, as well as reviews for several academic journals too. Dr. Chuka Onwumechili also previously served as interim dean for the School of Communications at Howard University and was vice president for the Digital Bridge Institute, the DBI, in Abuja, Nigeria. Dr. Chuka Onwumechili earned his PhD in Human Communication Studies at Harvard University, and he holds a master's in advertising from Northwestern University, Illinois. And he also holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Mass Communications from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and he's here now to lecture us on the topic titled Database Reporting. We're so glad to have you here, sir.
Okay, thank you for that welcome. I'm at Howard University, as you mentioned, and I'm glad to be here to talk to young Nigerians that are, I suppose, aspiring to be professional journalists. Some of you might already be practicing, I'm not quite sure. But I think even if you're not practicing, that this may be something that would help you in the long run, and that's what I'm about to share with you. But before I say that, I know that in the introduction that Adobe did mention that my work in terms of editing a journal and so on. Those are not specifically news kinds of journals. Those are academic type of journals. But by the way of news, in terms of the kinds of things that most of you do or you're aspiring to do, I've actually worked in that field, and I will just give you a short, something brief to let you know about what I did. Growing up, I believe at the age of 10, one of the things that I really liked was listening to radio commentary. And one of the very first ones that I had that really turned me into sports and journalism was listening to the great, I don't know how many of you remember him, because I think most of you are too young to even know the name. But the name is Shola Folonsho. He was a great radio commentator. And I listened to him do a report, do a radio commentary in 1971. That's a long time ago. 1971, when Enugu Rangers played the Shooting Stars of Ibadan. And the thing about the commentary was it stuck to me. And that made me think about being a journalist. I later met Ishola when he was alive, right? Because I believe he's dead now. But I met him at Ogun, when I was working as a youth corper for Ogun State Broadcasting Corporation, OGBC, which was new at that time. Until today, I still remember that meeting because I was in awe of this man. I never knew that I would meet him in flesh. So Ishola remains, to me, someone that I look up to. And I mention it because he was a guy who led me to, sports journalism. I eventually wrote for the satellite newspaper in the East, in Enugu. And up to today, I still do some work in terms of reporting sports. So essentially what I'm going to talk about today will be based on that, but we'll be focused on using data to enhance what you do. That's essentially what I'm here to do today. So we're going to spend the time here, probably over an hour, to talk about some of the things that I want to talk about related to database sports journalism. So let's get started with it. First thing that I want to talk about is, one, you know that you're in an age that is very special and an age that is not like any other age before. I did not grow up in an age like this, but you're growing up in a special age. And what is this about? It's an age where people, many of them have all kinds of sources for information on sports or just about anything in the world. They can access it. What this means is that professional journalists are no longer the only gatekeeper to stories or to news. People can get news from anywhere. For example, WhatsApp, people get news from WhatsApp. It doesn't necessarily have to come from you as a sports journalist. They get news from sports news from Facebook. They get sports news from Instagram and so on. So the question becomes for you, what is it that you plan to do in order to make yourself a critical source to which many people are going to go instead of going to WhatsApp or instead of going to Facebook or going to Instagram to get their sports news? What is it that you're going to do to differentiate yourself, to make yourself attractive? That's really what the question is about. So one other thing I want to talk about is, and this is an amazing data that I found, and you can check this information, is this: that the amount of information, the amount of data, not information, the amount of data that exists in today's world is said to be 4 times or more than each particle of sand that exists in the world today. So just think about that for a moment. That if you go outside and scoop up sand, you know you cannot even count it. But the estimation today is that all that sand or anywhere in the world, that you have far more information than all particles of sand in the world. That's something that's unbelievable. Until you really think about this, that any time that you type anything on WhatsApp or any other way that's going into the internet or somewhere else, that's a particle of information that you're putting out there. And it accumulates over time. That's really what we're talking about. And it's at the level where it is far more than the particles of sand that you can find anywhere in the world. But having said this, essentially what we're talking about is that all of this is really what? It's data. That's all it is. It's data. But data is not the same thing as information. To convert this data to information require making it useful to someone who encounters it. And that's part of your job, is to see data wherever it might be and make it useful to someone who will get it as information when you convert it to information. That's part of your task. And by the way, when we talk about this also, we also mention that even when you convert it to information, one of the things that you really hope will happen is that when you provide that information to whoever is going to acquire it, that they would turn it into their personal knowledge. That's the trajectory. It's moving it from simply providing information, but making it so that people become knowledgeable. That is, they have that knowledge, and maybe for some of them, they can even move it further, move away from simply the knowledge to a state where it turns into what? It turns into wisdom. So essentially what I've just described to you is a 4-stage process. The 4-stage process that I just described to you is data being the very first process. Data being moved to the next process. That next process is what I have described as information. That is part of your task. Then information being moved to a third level. That third level that I have just mentioned to you goes beyond you. It is one in which the people that you provide that information use it as knowledge. So that third level becomes knowledge. And from that knowledge, if they use it so many times and they can manipulate that knowledge, they get to the final stage, which is what we call wisdom. This is a 4-stage process again, from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. That's the trajectory that I just described. So what then that I'm about to talk to you then is, with this information being everywhere, what do you then do? We look at this chart that I just put up there. We just mentioned up here, I talked about the new world of information, meaning there's a lot of information there. And by the way, when we talk about this new world of information, you guys, as I've mentioned, are really in a world, a very different world. In today's world, you have far more information than any generation before you. If something happens to you and you need medical attention, all you got to do is go to the internet, you find a solution. Your fathers did not have that. So the amount of information you have today, the amount of data, it's incredible. It's never before in any generation before you. So you guys have far more than your parents ever did. And that's something to be proud of. The question then is, how do you contribute to this? And that's why we are here, and I'm going to get to that point. And I hope that from today, you can look at the kinds of reports that you put out there and say, how do I contribute to this? How do I contribute to this large amount of data that is out there? How do I make it meaningful to people? Okay, so we say that this is a new world of information. That's one basis. And your challenge is this middle one. How do you differentiate your work from the new world? What is it that you're going to do? And my view is that you have an opportunity to focus on data and to verify data in order to achieve this. That is essentially what I want you to think about. And that's what this third stage is. So I want you to basically focus on getting to this point, this point right here, where you are able to use data to make a huge difference in the world. Okay. Here, I'm going to stop shortly. I have several other slides, but I don't want to go too quickly. At this point, do you have any questions for me?
Please, if you have any question, just raise your hand so that I can call you.
Yeah. If you don't have a question, then I'm going to ask you a question if you don't have one. Okay, McDonald, what's your question?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, my question is based on the number 2, differentiating your work in this new world, making use of data. Now, on this, it has a lot of things, but I want you to please practically explain this for me more in terms of differentiating your work, because there are several works technically we are in the new world of journalism. So I want you to throw more light on this particular one.
Okay, that one actually is the key thing that I'm about to discuss today. So that's further down the line. I definitely will be talking about that in far more depth. But in terms of what I've talked about already, do you have any questions about that?
No, sir, for now.
Okay, who's this? Itare, question.
No question for now, sir. Maybe before the class come to an end, I suppose, sir.
Okay. How about Anne? How about you? And Nicholas?
No question for now.
No question? Okay. So let's move on. From time to time, I'm going to stop to ask questions. And the reason is I just want to be sure that all of us are still on the same page, that I'm not moving too fast, so that I can answer any questions that you may have. Now, the next slide that I wanted to talk about is, why is it that we want to talk about this data-based journalism? There is a rationale for it, and that rationale is what I have up here. The rationale is that there are 4 levels of knowing that all of us, particularly in our world, that we know. And that also is associated with whether the work you're doing is believable or not. That is, whether the work you're doing is considered credible. So there are 4 ways of knowing this. Those ways are the ways that I have put up here, and I'm going to describe each of them. The first one I've mentioned here is tenacity. The next one is what we call logic. Some people will call it as a priori. The other one is authority, and the other one is scientific method. What I'm going to talk about today when we talk about database journalism is really going to be based on these 2 things that I have highlighted here in red. That is authority and scientific method. But even though we're going to talk about those 2, I want to share with you the other 2 ways of knowing that I say is a no-no, that you really shouldn't rely on. These 2 ways of knowing when you do your report. And this is very important because the problem we see today is in places like, let's say, like WhatsApp and social media, they often will use these 2 ways of knowing, and I'm saying, you're better than that. You could do much better, and that's why I'm saying that you're going to use these 2 ways of knowing. But let's talk about these first 2. The first one, which is often called tenacity, is where you make a claim, as you often see on WhatsApp, and no one provides a support for it. They're basically just telling us, I just said it, so believe it. I'm your friend. It's true because I told you. Now, at your level, you should say, no, I'm not going to believe you simply because you're my friend. I don't care whether you're my friend. So tenacity is something that should never be accepted. As a journalist, you got to go for far more than tenacity. No one should simply tell you, believe me because I said so. Question is, who are you? Why should I believe you? Okay, so we got to go beyond tenacity. The next one is what we call logic. Logic, of course, means that you set up a premise, and from that premise, you reach a conclusion. For example, if we say that people who are taking this class are usually very good journalists. So if someone in this class, like, for example, we have Michael Ebenezer in this class, and the person tomorrow, we see him, then we're going to reach the conclusion that the person is a good journalist because the person is taking this class. That's a logical conclusion. You can use logic, and we've seen people use logic, but it's still not acceptable. Because logic can only go so far. It is better than tenacity, but it's still not what I want you guys to do. You guys should be better than that. What I now expect you to do is to use these two right here, authority and scientific method. And the question is, what are they? Authority means that when you write your report, you have to cite somebody who is expected to provide valuable information to that report. Meaning, if you're talking about something about the super egos, talk to someone who should know, who's a credible super ego source. That's considered an authority on super egos. So essentially, the use of authority is sort of like the use of a source and a credible source. That's what we mean by the use of authority. And that's what I would expect for each of you to do when you are writing your stories. Now, however, the kind of thing that I'm saying for you to do today goes beyond simply using authority. When we talk about database journalism, as we're going to work on, we want to go beyond the use of authority. That's essentially what I'm asking you to do. That authority is not enough. What I am expecting you to do is to use what is called the scientific method. Scientific method means that you actually go out, do additional research on yourself, by yourself, and try to support whatever claim you are making. So I am going to be expecting you, and as you would see with the example that I'm going to give, is that you use links to other stories that support your story. And that's what journalists elsewhere are beginning to do, is to begin to add these scientific methods to what they're doing. That's the modern journalism. And they can find a lot of things to add because of what I just explained to you before, which is the amount of data that exists today in the world. There is no shortage of support for anything that you write today. So what we're simply asking you to do is find that support, provide a link for the reader, so the reader can get that support for your story. That's really what the scientific method is calling. And in certain cases, that you carry out a study on your own. But even if you don't carry out a study on your own, piece several studies or several works that other people have done to fully support whatever you're writing. That's essentially what database journalism is about. Is providing data to support whatever you're writing. So that's essentially what I'm going to be asking you to do. So this is the reason or the rationale for database journalism that we are talking about. So let's go on to the next slide. And we here try to compare that database journalism to what we used to have. And here what I try to do and to explain that to you is to look at what you probably learned in journalism school, which is this one right here, where people talk about, how you write in the inverted pyramid, and then talking about the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why. Basically, all of you know this, I assume, because this is the basic thing that you learn in any journalism school. And so I think that all of you already know this, because this is required when you write, you write a lead, for example, for a story. We will be expecting you to have all of this in there. And to use a source, and most journalism will do short pieces and so on. That's the old style journalism. But when we are talking about data-based journalism, we're going to be talking about something that's slightly different from that is database, that allows you to access all kinds of sources that you can now link to your story to make your story full and far more detailed so that people would get a fuller picture of whatever you're writing. So these are the new thinking and addition. For every story that is written, when we're talking about database journalism, you have to ask the question, what is the history of this story? Because every story usually has a history to it. Your task as a journalist is to ask the question, what's the history behind it? And then seek to bring that history to the reader. Here we are talking about print journalism, but even when you're talking about broadcast journalism, that listener needs to know the background to your story. And that's the same thing here, which is to find the history behind whatever that story is. That's a key point. Okay. The reason for this is that you find that when we talk about the 5 W's here, there is really nothing about history, but we are asking you now in database journalism to dig deeper, provide data that provides a historical context for what you're doing. That's one. The other thing also is ask, how do I feel it happen? That is, what is your take about this? How did it happen? Tell a story that is captivating, and that is also based on information or data that's out there. So the key thing that surrounds all of these things that I'm talking about is providing a fuller picture to whatever you're writing. That's really what this is. Then you have to ask the question, is there more to it? What else is there to know? This is something you really have to think deep, and we're going to provide an example of a story. And in that story, I'm going to ask you to help me, although I've mentioned several things, but I'm going to ask you as a challenge to be able to identify where you can find additional links to what you're doing. That is the work that we will do today as a class. But I want you to bear in mind as we get to do that work, to bear in mind what this is, these questions that we've raised here. This is the new style journalism, questions that you need to raise whenever you write a story. That is, what is the history behind what I'm writing? You've got to go find out what that history is. And as I already mentioned, with the amount of data that exists today in this world, you can locate that history. So it's not too much to ask. You can dig deep, even through the internet, to locate this history. So then we have to then put in your feeling in terms of how do I feel it happen and things like that. You have to do that. Then you have to ask yourself, what else is there to know? Okay. Do we have any questions so far? Any questions? Don't want to go too fast. Question here. Let's see. Who do I call on here? Okay, good. Kayode.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the lecture so far. So the question I want to ask is based on the last point you just made. What's the history? And more like sources. So if we are going to get a source, can we get a source without the person's permission? Like, is it appropriate? Because you mentioned something about links earlier, getting links to support our stories. Don't we need like the permission to use a link from a different source? That's my question.
No, you don't need, because the way you do it, and we're gonna show that, is that you could use a hyperlink. Basically, you're linking someone to send them to the place where they are going to read additional stuff for the story. So you don't need a permission for that to use a hyperlink. You understand what I'm saying? Although we are going to—
Yes, I do. Yes, example. I do.
Yeah, and what I'm basically asking is that when we write a story, for a fuller picture of that story, all you need to do is provide hyperlinks to where they can provide additional details. And for that, you don't need any permission to do so. Usually, for you to require permission is, let's say, if you're going to use extensive parts of someone else's story, and you're going to use that as part of your story, then you should get permission for it. But that's not the same thing as providing a link to their old story.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, great, Kade. Someone else had a question. Okay. This is Tangard. Okay.
Yes, sir. Please,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would want to draw us back a little.
Okay.
My question is coming from that of the processes of data, the process that data undergoes until it gets to the point of wisdom. Hello, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You want me to go through it again?
Yes, I just want to be clarified about. I said from data goes to information, knowledge, and wisdom. So my question goes to us: can there be any barrier at any of these points before it gets to the audience? Can there be a barrier in any of the processes? Thank you, sir.
Oh yeah, I mean there could be barriers, but remember now that what we're saying here is that at those final levels, let's start from the first level first of all, which is data. Basically, data is unorganized. Basically, when you have data, it's unorganized. It's when it becomes organized so that it can be acquired by someone or understood by someone. That is the point where it becomes what? It becomes information, right? Okay. Now, in terms of it becoming information, at that point, we are saying that that data has already organized. When an individual, that is a single person, takes that particular information and assumes that information, we are basically saying that the person has what? The person has gathered knowledge. So for example, when you guys do collect your information and then, you know, put it out there, if an individual reads your work or views your work and they are able to repeat it tomorrow, what it means is the person has what? The person has knowledge. Now, the higher level where we then talk about wisdom is there is much more to that, because at the wisdom level, what it means is that not only does this person that we are talking about who has this knowledge, who's able to express this knowledge, that person adds something else to it. The person can manipulate that knowledge. What we mean by manipulating the knowledge is that they are so knowledgeable that they can change that information, add other things from other areas to it, and reach different conclusions with it. That means that they are able to manipulate it, to piece it together, to change it around. That individual now has wisdom. That's the highest level. That's the trajectory right there. Okay. Now, of course, as you ask, there could be all kinds of problems in there. For example, if the person, just one good example here, if the person has you provide that information to that person and that person misreads that information, they are not going to be able to get to that point of knowledge. That will be noise that we are talking about. Sort of like you guys probably learned in terms of the SMCR model, that will constitute what we call noise. Okay. Did I answer your question? Or is there a part of it that I missed that I need to address?
I'm not that clear though.
Okay, tell me where you're not clear then.
I was thinking that as the data goes, that at some point there might be cases where you said about a misinterpretation. I don't know. You said a misreading. So is there any case whereby the audience, there can be misreading of this data? Like, for instance, okay, let me bring a scenario. When I was small, as a little child, I heard about this story that they said Nigeria played with India and we lost 99-0, something like that. Now, I know it was until I grew up and I began doing my research and I knew that Nigeria has never encountered India in any football match before. So you can see that I have this data information. So at any point I find that even till my SS2, I usually tell other persons this, that Nigeria play with India, that India did not put on boots, and we lost, there was lion, all this. So at that case, I don't know whether was there an okay, is that case, is there any misinterpretation of the data, or as a child, I did not get the information, or I was given the wrong data at that case? Please, can you clarify me on that?
I mean, obviously you got the wrong information right there. I mean, that was wrong, that was false. The information that you provided was false. So, but the other thing also that you introduced there is your ability as a child to be able to investigate the credibility of what you're getting. So that distorted your ability to be able to make sense or to challenge, whatever you have. And by the way, it's a story that I had as a child, and I couldn't challenge it until I became an adult and acquired other skills, just as you were able to acquire those skills in order to be able to challenge it. Those are the kinds of things that really creates distortion in terms of our ability to acquire something that is credible, because we do not have that ability at such a young age. Okay. Let's hear from Kayode. You have your hands up, or do I go to?
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. I was mistaken.
Okay, so Umukoro then. Was it this Joshua, right?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
My question is, I'm actually a poet by training, and as a poet, I understand that data could be translated into information, and in the process of information, some things can be encoded. It might be encoded.
Hello? 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 Joshua? 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 I'm not sure he
encoded at all times be an inferred knowledge. Thank you.
I didn't hear the last part of your question though. What was the question?
Now the question I asked is this: as a poet, I understand that some informations are on codes; they are encoded, and it would take graphic representation to have inferred meaning. Is it proper that all times information should be encoded based on the audience you're trying to reach?
Well, the thing, Joshua, whenever information is sent, it is also sent, it's always sent with a code. There is no information that is sent without a code. Absolutely all of them are encoded. What do we mean by encoded? The fact that I am speaking to you right now in English language, it is coded. Only those who can understand English can decode what I am saying. That's what is meant by the code. For example, somebody that is in my village who has no understanding of English cannot decode what I am telling you right now. That's what they are referring to as a code. So there is no way we can avoid messages being coded. That always comes to any information that is transmitted. It always transmitted in a code. Okay, so I hope I answered that. Let's then move on to the next thing. So what am I now asking you to do? We arrive basically at the core of why we are having this lecture today. Right here, I am asking you to do niche sports journalism. That is, I am saying that because today we have a lot of people doing sports journalism everywhere. There's a lot of information on sports. You have to ask yourself, do I want to be like everyone else? Is that what I'm really seeking to be? To be like the next person? What I suppose, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, is that each of you here is not seeking to be like the next person next to you. That instead what you're seeking and why you're taking this class is to ask yourself, how do I differentiate myself? How do I create something that is different, but something that would attract people? Something that makes me marketable. That's why you're here. You're not here because you want to be like the next person seated by you. And that's what I'm saying, that one way to try to do this is to create niche sports journalism. Now, what that means is that even though you may take this class with everyone else, all the people that are here today, that in your mind you're asking yourself, I want to be different from the person that's in this class. How can I use this niche sports journalism? I've heard about it. Today was lectured on, but I'm going to take it to a new level. I am going to do something that is specific to me. Something that makes my work different from whatever this person is saying, whatever Dr. Onwumechili says today. I'm going to go out there and do something that enhances it, that makes it different. I don't have to do exactly what he says. I can go there and make it even better. That's actually what I want you to do today, is to ask yourself, how do I make it better than whatever he says today? How do I differentiate myself? That's the niche that I want you to think about. Something that separates you from everyone else. So you're asking yourself, what's my edge? What is it that I can bring to the table? That's really what this is about. And essentially, my belief is this, that data journalism provides you the opportunity to create this niche. Because when I look at the reports that's taking place today in sports, and I really don't care whether it's by European journalists or by American journalists, there is very little of this that is taking place. So why can't we have a Nigerian journalist that does this? You don't have to do exactly what they're doing in Europe or in America. You can do better. After all, those journalists that are out there in the United States or in England, they're in a classroom just like you. And there is nothing that says that you cannot create a niche that is better than what they're doing. That's the point that I'm making here. And by the way, when we are talking about this, there are some people already providing some leadership in this area, but I don't think that it's enough. And what I'm saying is that you are really at the vanguard, and that you can take advantage of being at the vanguard and trying to provide leadership here so that someone in England or someone in America would say, hey, you know what? I like what that Nigerian journalist is doing. Can I do it for my New York newspaper? Because I just saw this newspaper in Nigeria and here's what they're doing. I want to be able to emulate what this guy in Lagos is doing. So I'm saying that you are that vanguard and that you can do this. Okay. Do we have any questions so far as I talk about these things here? Please, if you have a question, make sure you interrupt me. Now, the thing about this niche journalism that we are talking about is, think about the kinds of people you're serving today and why this niche sports journalism is important. Who are these people? These people are like you. They are not like people who are in their 70s or 80s who basically are fed one little amount of news and that's great for them. Let me tell you a little bit about the audience that you're serving today and why you need to meet them where they are. And that you can't meet them where they are with the old style journalism. Here is the thing about the people you're serving today. Just a few pointers. One, these are individuals who are seeking a background to a story. If you're talking about Nigeria playing Ghana, why does it matter? What's the history behind it? That's what they want to know. It's not the fact that they're just playing them as it was in the last month or so in the World Cup. But why is it a big deal? What's the history behind it? What happened previously? Can you provide us a link so that we live it again, a match that had been played previously? We can relive it. Then, of course, they are, of course, want sources, as most of you have mentioned, and I know that most of the schooling that you have had talks about sources. That is something that is normal and is something that's required, that you look for sources. But also statistics. What's the statistics behind an event? Is there a way that we can take a look at these statistics and find something new that other people have never mentioned before? Because that's one thing about statistics, is that you can take a look at statistics today, find something, then you take a look at the same stats and data 2 years from now, and you're finding something else by examining it. And what we are asking in this data journalism is to be able to use that data and think and say, well, here is a new relationship that no one's talked about. But the data has been there for years. But now you have a new set of eyes to look at this, essentially. And you're discovering new relationships, new interactions that you can talk about. That's what data journalism allows you to do. You can also say that from what I am seeing right now, and based on the data that I have, I can project the future. But you can only do this projection by analyzing data. You can't just project to the future without something to back you up. There's got to be data to back you up. So that's the essence of data, to be able to project. And you can put that projection in your story as well. And that's what people are looking for. People are looking for all these kinds of information. These are the new kind of audience that you have. You don't have an audience from the 1960s. You don't have an audience from the 1970s that just want a little story here. That's not the audience you're serving. The audience you're serving is really a knowledgeable audience that have access to an unbelievable amount of data. So you have to be sure that you realize who you're serving. This young audience is a very knowledgeable audience. And you've got to meet them where they are by providing them as much information as is possible. And you can do so with links. That's the point that I'm raising here. And I'm going to show you in a short while a video that would help you be able to see what I am talking about.
Sir, we can't hear the audio of the video.
Oh, you can hear?
Yes, sir.
Seriously? Wow. Let's see what's wrong, because I can hear it from here. Can you hear it there? Hello?
No, sir. No, sir. We can't hear it.
Wow. I don't know what to do on this right now. Okay, here is what I'm going to do. Okay. I hope I didn't disconnect you guys here.
No, you're still connected, sir.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I can return to the it's sad that you can't, that you are unable to see, because I think that captures a lot of the things that I wanted to show you. Okay. Well, can you see the slide?
Yes, sir. We can see the slide.
Okay. So here is a thing that I was going to show you. Unfortunately, you say you can't hear the audio. I don't know what happened to it and why you can't hear the audio. But essentially what basically was designed to do, and I'm going to send you this slide, so maybe by playing it on your own, you should be able to see it. The thing about it is that it points out some of the things that I have talked about in terms of the incredible amount of data that's out there and how you can look at that data, see new insights or be able to gather new insights from the data so that you can generate stories that people weren't aware of before. That can help us. And in terms of sports journalism particularly, I think that you can do this. In the Nigerian context, certainly you can, because I think that what's missing as I read a lot of the stories, not just Nigeria, by the way, but all over the world, that very few people are actually using data to provide us the kinds of information that is necessary, the kind of information that the public really wants. And by this, what I mean is simply that we want to show some historical information. We want to see you analyze data in a different way to inform the reader about some relationships that they do not necessarily see. And that's what data can do for you by analyzing data and allowing us to see new linkages that are not there. But if you just report a story straight up, without that background, without that analysis of data, we do not get a fuller picture of whatever you're talking about. That's the essence of it. And that's essentially what this video really talks about, is that we can find new relationships in terms of data. Okay, unfortunately, it doesn't show. This is something, however, that you're going to be able to access on your own when I send the slide to the class, I believe. I would send it to the class so that the class would be able to see and watch this on their own. But that's what I'm looking for you guys to be able to do going forward. But do we have any questions? My apologies in terms of that this video, you really couldn't listen to it because I thought that this would be something that would help you to better understand what we are talking about. Questions right here?
Please, if you have any questions, raise your hand so that our lecturer can call you up.
Questions before we go to the practical work that I'm going to need your help. Okay, if there are no questions, then we move on to this practical work. Now, here's a story. This story was published by The Guardian, and I believe all of you can see the story, but I don't know whether you can see the type that well. Can you?
Yes, sir, we can. We can see your slide.
Can you see the type though? Oh, why am I moving back here? Okay. Can you read the type?
Yes, sir, we can read the type.
Okay. Now, the ones that I have in blue, you would see some that I have underlined in blue. Now, there is a reason for underlining it in blue, because I think that this particular story, which was written on January 22nd by The Guardian, it was written in The Guardian by this particular journalist. This is really talking about Nigeria being able, they're about to play Ghana for a place in the World Cup. So it came out in January, I believe, presumably right after the draws were made, and there were expectations about what Nigeria was capable of doing. Of course, we know what the final result is. What the final result is, but that's beside the point. The point that I want you to take here is that if one of you was writing this story and you're going to do some of the things that we are talking about in this class, how might this story have been different? So this is a practical example that we are doing here. How might this story be different? And here is how it could be different. Is that we take this story right here, and before we send it out, we say, okay, we are going to underline places that we are going to put hyperlinks. And these are the ones that I have here in blue, are the places that I think should be in hyperlinks. But there may be other places in here that you think should be in hyperlinks. And that's one of the questions that I have for you. And that's why I'm asking, are you able to read this? Because I'm not pretty sure that it's large enough for you to read, but since you are able to do so, I'm going to be asking you to please advise on what else, if you were writing this story, what else would you have underlined here that you can find a hyperlink to, that you think your audience would be able to learn from? Because these ones are simply the ones that are, from my view, that should have a hyperlink, and here is why. So I'll go through this, then I'm going to come to you. So after I go through this, I'm going to come to you to ask you, which other ones would you have highlighted and why? And where would you seek to get the link to provide your audience with additional information? So the first one is, we said here that Nigeria, if they hope to qualify for a 4th straight World Cup, right? My question then here is, if that is the case for a 4th straight World Cup, there may be a reader here who doesn't know what are the other 3 straight World Cup. Why don't we provide a link that shows us the other World Cup? So if a reader wants to know, or the reader has a question of, they mean four straight World Cup? I'm not aware of that. What's the first, second, third World Cup? If they wanted to know that, oh, come on. If they wanted to know that, then they would click this link to be able to read that part. If they don't want to know about it, they just move right on. Or if they already know about it, they move right on. Okay, if they come out here, it's a straight time African champions. What is that? When did Nigeria become an African champion in the past? Do we just assume that the audience knows this? There are some people that were born right after that have no clue. When Nigeria were African champions before, or when Nigeria was an African champion. So you provide a link that shows when Nigeria won the Africa Cup before. So if somebody wants to know that because they don't know, they would be able to click on it. But if you already know, you keep reading on. This is the job of a hyperlink. That's why a hyperlink is necessary in stories. Then we come up here with 7th appearance at football's biggest stage. Wow. So Nigeria has been there before. What were the previous occasions that Nigeria was there? So always think about the audience. What are the kinds of questions that they may be asking? And then set up a hyperlink that gives them additional information based on that particular issue. That's the work of a hyperlink. We come in here, it talks about the other teams. What was this? That Nigeria finished first in that group against these teams. What are the records, Nigerian records against these teams? That's another hyperlink, and so forth and so on. So that's the same idea as we go through this one, their 4th appearance, what's this? They're out in an AFCON in Cameroon, knowing all that kind of information. Now, my question then is this. Where else in reading this story do you think we should have included a hyperlink? Adobe, go ahead.
Okay, sir. The second paragraph, the Super Eagles were one of the 10 African nations who went into Saturday's draw ceremony. So my audience, or the audience rather, would want to know the other 9 African nations who were present in the draw ceremony.
Great, wonderful. That's exactly what we are talking about. That is, because we can assume there may be somebody reading this who doesn't even know what these nations are. So a hyperlink provides additional information. Any other person? Kayode?
Okay, sir. The 4th paragraph, the Super Eagles will have been.
You said the 4th paragraph, right? Okay, yeah.
The Super Eagles who have been to every FIFA World Cup except one. I think they would want to know which one was missed. So hyperlink should probably be there.
Great. Because someone might be reading this and saying, wow, I thought Super Eagles have been to all these World Cups recently. So which one did they miss? So it's important then to put the hyperlink at that point so that if they wanted to know which one was missing, Then they can go to that one and find out when the Super Eagles actually missed the World Cup. Because we can't assume that everybody knows this. So we can put a hyperlink there. So if they needed additional information, additional reading, that's where they are going to go to. Okay. Joshua?
I believe there should be hyperlinks in the names of the legends stated, like El Hadji Diop, Adebayo, just for reference, so we know who they are.
Exactly. Now we are getting, this is wonderful, the answers you're giving. So this is essentially what we are talking about. So when we are really talking about database journalism, here we just give an example of how you can use hyperlinks. But hyperlinks is really only one of them. There can also be hyperlinks that actually take you to where you may create your own data, your own statistics and things like that. That's really giving you the picture of what we are talking about. But the essential things that I want you to take away from all of this is that let's think about who our audience is today. Our audience are not our parents. I mean, your parents, by the way, not our parents, because my parents or even myself, I didn't grow up with a lot of this information. But in your age, you're growing up with an incredible amount of information. And because you're growing up with this incredible amount of information, you will find out that your audience are used to this, so they are seeking a huge amount of information. So let us not write as if we are writing to people in the 1960s or in the 1970s. Let's think about our current audience, and that current audience is one really that has a lot of information, that not only do they have it, they expect it. So let's meet them where they are. Let's meet them in terms of their expectation. That's really what we are talking about. So in something like this, we can link to stories, but we can also link to videos. We can link to all sorts of things. Let me ask a question before we move on with beyond this particular slide, because we're almost coming to the end of this before we now go into the question session. How many of you, when you leave here today, will say that if they are doing a story tomorrow, they have to consider the audience and their need for additional information? Help. Okay. McDonald? Go ahead, Samuel.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. If I paraphrase what you say, so how many of us will consider our audience whenever we want to post out an information?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I particularly, like on your lecture here, you made that our audience, which is the end product of everything we are processing, must richly be involved in the know of data we encode, because not letting them understand what you are doing definitely means that whatever we are doing doesn't actualize its aim. So what is necessary is that we need to know that we are working to inform, educate, and make people understand, not to be deformed in any particular information, which is a vital process for journalists. Thank you.
Good. And the thing also is that when working with the audience, we also have to look at, you know, what is it that this audience is really looking for? They are looking for a whole lot of information. We can provide them links to that information so that if they want to search for it, they go, if they want to read that additional information, they have that option to do so. Like we've demonstrated here with hyperlinks, that they can, if they already know that information, they can read right on and forget about going to the hyperlink. But if, for example, they don't know and they wanted additional information, that it's right there for them, they can just click on that hyperlink and find it. This is really scratching the surface in terms of talking about database journalism. That's really what we're asking you to do. And by the way, as I said, if we are to begin to do this, that is that you begin to do this in terms of your reports, you're essentially going to be at the vanguard of this type of journalism. Because this type of journalism is not really something that you find everywhere in the world, but you're beginning to find it. So if you start it or you're doing this, you are really at the vanguard. You are among the leaders to do this, because this is where journalism is going. So it's not simply writing some 20 words something or 250 words something. No. It's providing links to additional story that makes that the person wants to read, pertaining to the key thing that you're providing to them. Sort of like the example we are providing here, that at this time, if we imagine that we are on that day, January 22, 2022, and there was this draw that had taken place and it was announced that the Super Eagles are playing in Ghana. We have to think about, if we write this story, what is it that the reader of this story is expecting? What might they want additional information? And you've already pointed out some of the places that we ought to put hyperlinks. And that's really what we have to do, is to be able to think about what might that audience think about? And then help the audience by providing them hyperlinks to those things that they may need. That's your job. That's your task. Meet your audience where they are. Meet their expectations. If you do all of that, you're really at the vanguard of journalism. That is the new age journalism that we are talking about, which is going to be database. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide right here. So these are some of the things we've already talked about right here. We are talking about the importance of hyperlinks, that is creating hyperlinks. And some of you have already provided examples where we should have put in hyperlinks, or if you were writing this story where you should have put hyperlinks. And not only did you point out to these places, but you also provided support why we should put those hyperlinks, because that's really the process, is to ask yourself, why do I need a hyperlink here? That is, you're now thinking like the audience. Is there someone who may need to read additional stuff about this? So you've suggested hyperlinks, and that's the key thing here as you build this up. The other one is providing data sets. These data sets can be set up by you. The other thing is, because there's a huge amount of data. Remember at the beginning, we talked about the incredible amount of data that exists on almost everything that you can think about in this world. And all of them are really at your fingertip. What I mean by being at your fingertip is that in today's world, in the World Wide Web, there's so much data that's out there. You only have to have a little bit of time to search for it and to locate it. So if you locate it, you may locate maybe 4, 5, or 6 of them, whatever it is, sources where you get this. You can create your own figures from it. You can create your own tables from it. You can create graphs. Now, in the video that we, unfortunately, it didn't have an audio, that could have been very helpful, but hopefully you'll be able to watch that at your own time. You would see how, in fact, they are able to use stats that were unrelated before, that no one had talked about. They were able to use it to make new discoveries, to provide information that was not readily available. By reviewing data, that's really what we're asking you to do. That's your work as a journalist, as a new age journalist, is examining data and be able to find new relationships and reporting those relationships. Then, of course, you can add videos to support your work, all kinds of videos or links to video to support your work. And why I say links to video here is that in certain places, some rights holders for videos would allow you to provide links to videos, but it's not usually as easy as providing links to stories. It's much easier to provide links to stories than to provide links to videos, because sometimes they would cut off that your link if you do not expressly ask for it. So that's one issue that can come up with videos, but you can use videos to enhance your storyline as well. The reason being that as we find out, people that are growing up today, video is really an expectation. They are looking for videos. They are not like people of several decades ago that may read a story and there is no video, there is no photo, and it's okay. In today's world, people are expecting videos, they're expecting photographs, all of that in support of a story that is written. So that's a requirement that's out there. Then finally, what you already know and what you do already is add critical sources. This is important. And again, with critical sources, the thing that you want to be thinking about is, what are those levels of knowing that I talked about? Where I talked about, you going from tenacity all the way to the scientific method in terms of ways of knowing. Okay. So what is the impact of all of this? Yeah, we keep talking about it, but what's the impact? Why does it really matter? Or is it just talk? Why does it really matter? Here is why it matters. One, there's a lot of information out there. If you want to create a name for yourself, if you want to make it big, you can't be like everyone else. You just can't do that. What you need to do is to create a niche. What differentiates you from the next person? That's the question you ask yourself. And what we are thinking is that you can use data or database journalism to create that niche. Something that makes someone get up every morning and say, you know what? I want to go read about this individual, what he's done. Maybe it's Coyote. What is Coyote doing? What did he write on today? Because I know that Coyote, guess what? He provides all this support for what he's doing. And therefore, I'm going to read about what he's doing. That's really what this is about. It's creating that niche and that name for yourself. Okay. The other one is creating, of course, when you create this niche, you got to make it compelling. You have to make it authoritative. And creating a situation where you're authoritative is, if you do this consistently, people come to trust you as a credible source and as somebody who's authoritative, meaning that the stuff you're putting out there is something that they can, vouch for, something that they know is credible, then they're going to come to you repeatedly because they know that there is some value in what you're putting out there. So that's one of the things that you're going to look to as you try to create a niche for yourself, that these are the kinds of things that you want to be part of that niche. So it's essentially all of them culminate to this point right here, where we talk about that your work has to be engaging in terms of the style in which you present it and so on. That also means that you have a rich amount of information in your work. That's the impact that we are saying that you need to look towards making in your field. And that's, we believe that database journalism is the thing that can help you to make that impact. So with the final slide that we look at, this is actually, I think this is the final slide. Is it? I think so. Oh, I still got one more right here. Oof. After this, I want you to ask questions, but the key takeaways, the things that I want you to take away today, that is that we've had this session today, and I want you tomorrow that if there are things that you want to remember about what we talked about today, those things are these things that I have listed here. Those are the 4 key takeaways from what we did today. One of them is the belief that you can make a difference. That you as an individual, not as a class, you as an individual can live today and say, database journalism can be a way that I can differentiate myself in the field. And here is how I am going to do it. But that's left up to you. But we are saying this is a way for you to create this space for yourself. That space is one, if you really look at it, you're saying, we may have, say, 400, 500 journalists out there in Nigeria, but I don't care what that number is. What I care about is that I, as an individual, stands out as different from all these other people who are called journalists. And here is why I stand alone as different. And here is why people are going to come to my work. Because I provide something to them that no one else is able to do, to provide to them. This is essentially what the new journalism is about. And as I keep saying, when we talk about this new journalism, you're really at the vanguard, because the rest of the world, only very few people have moved on to this new journalism. People are still entrenched in the past. We are simply saying nothing that is new. What we are simply saying here is, meet your audience where your audience is. Your audience is where they are in an age that is called the information age. There is no age before that experienced the kind or the amount of information that exists today. So meet them where they are, meet that audience where they are. And you can meet them by providing all of this. That is data, graphs, pictorials, and links. That's what you can do to meet them there. Okay, that's the end of the lecture part. Today, we have, I hope we have about 30 minutes or so for your questions and answers right now. So let's kick off with that. We do have moderators here for those questions. So let's get on with that. Okay, we have the first question here. Joshua, let's go with you.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Your lecture has been, I said thank you very much for the time. Your lecture has been very informative. My question is this: consider the time schedule for an editor to submit his report. What is the fastest and efficient way to creating hyperlinks in a report, knowing that it's a reference point? How do you actually link your reference sources to the hyperlinks?
Okay, that's pretty easy. To get the hyperlinks, it's probably going to take you, for the kind of story that we just did, it's probably going to take you no more than, in my own estimation, no more than a quarter of an hour. That's about 15 minutes, maybe even less. 15 minutes is really exaggerating it. Because a lot of times, all you can do is just do an internet search, you put the keyword in there, and it's going to land you to the stories. And you quickly read the story to make sure that it's the right story. And then you set up a hyperlink. A hyperlink, you can set that up on the internet pretty easily.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. My other question is this. In photojournalism, is it possible to create hyperlinks to photos that takes you to the main story if you don't want to put up the story together with the photos?
I think so. I think you can do that, but I'm not technologically savvy for that, but I've seen people do that.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Questions? Questions? Or should I? Okay. Thank God.
Yes, sir. So is there any relationship or difference between statistics and data?
Oh, yeah. We remember data normally is unorganized. When you're talking about statistics, basically you're essentially focusing on things that are numbers that are sort of like a subset of reality, where you're using numbers to represent reality. That's what stats would be. And with stats, one of the things with stats, that is the way we are using stats here, and we are not talking about stats for research, because stats for research, we will talk about it sort of differently. Well, maybe let me just talk about both of them, but one of them is not something that's useful for journalism, to be honest. The main way that people often talk about use of stats is that they will talk about statistical calculations, where you do things like, there's something called like t-tests, Pearson and R, and measuring R and doing correlations and things like that. That is absolutely not necessary. That's not what I'm talking about. Those types of statistics are the things that you would do if you were in the academic area and you were doing a dissertation or a thesis. That's totally unnecessary for us. What we mean by stats that are relevant to the work of a journalist is simply using numbers and already calculated stats that are out there that you can find on the internet, simply using those ones and not requiring you to develop ones from the scratch, except if you have the ability to do so, but that's not what we are requiring you to do. Okay.
Okay, just a follow-up, more clarification. Like, let's say, for instance, if I say a game between Liverpool and Manchester City, Manchester United, for instance, and I say, Liverpool have won the Premier League for 19 times, and Manchester United have won the Premier League for 20 times. Then if I continue by saying that Liverpool have won the Ballon d'Or, they brought a player to win the Ballon d'Or for once, then Manchester United has 2 players who have won the Ballon d'Or. Is that a data or statistics?
That's, I mean, that's data that you have basically made useful for people. Because if remember, the way we define data is that they are just a bunch of numbers that make no sense. That's what data is. Okay, but here you are making that data to be useful for people so that it becomes information, basically. it's informative what you just provided, because we now know that the Ballon d'Or means something. It shows a certain level of achievement. That's meaningful. That's informative. It's not just mere numbers. If it was just mere numbers, then we would be talking about data. Did I answer your question?
Okay, sir. Yes, very well, sir.
Okay. Questions? Help? Questions? You guys gotta have a lot of questions out there. Or should I ask those questions then? Okay, let me ask those questions. Tamara Tonye. Here's a question.
Yes, good evening.
Okay, good evening. What's your takeaway from today? What would you say is the major thing that you learned from today?
Okay, I learned that adding data to my article could give it an edge over other articles, because it will be providing more information for the readers that are based on facts and statistics, which other articles don't necessarily provide.
Great point, because that's actually what you just explained is actually what I want as a takeaway for all of us today. So great answer right there.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Michael, I come to you, Michael Ebenezer. How do you plan to use this?
So you said, how do I plan to use what I've learned today?
Exactly.
Okay, sir. I intend using it by applying them. I love the part where you say we should learn how to carve a niche for ourselves. That means in reporting our stories and writing whatsoever we are writing, we should always learn to give this signature, like put this mark on whatsoever we are writing, even in our writing style. And in that, whenever people read what we have written, they will be like, this work is really coming from this person. In this way, you have really started putting out yourself out there for readers to really know the stuff you're made of.
Great. And actually, I'm looking forward to seeing that each one of you put this to use going forward. But I have additional questions here for, I think, Mike Cookie. I have a question for you. Mike, what do you do currently in terms of what media house do you work for, and how do you currently do your reports? Is Mike there?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think if you don't mind, you could take the question again. The network was not very clear. I didn't get that.
All right, sorry about that. The question is, which media house do you work for currently, and how do you do your report as of today?
Okay, so basically I'm with I brand and TV. It's an international brand. I do political coverage and news reporting. So I source my information basically from the dailies across the different newspapers. I gather them and I collate them, and before going on air, basically that's just it. So.
Great. Here's what I suggest, Mike. Is one of the things to also think about. Let us say that you collect this information from all these dailies. The Nigerian, I think I've forgotten what that platform is, but there are several platforms, by the way, either international organizations that collect data about Nigeria. The Nigeria as well collects a lot of data. One of the places that I use is like census data on Nigeria that you collect from the Nigerian government office. All of these are in the internet. That sometimes, instead of just using the Nigerian dailies, you can actually go to governmental sites that hold data, or international organizations, global organizations that have data that include Nigerian data. That way, to build up a lot of information about, about Nigeria and the statistics to back it up. For example, right now on the internet, you can find statistics about percentage or the age, the average age of people who graduate from primary school in Nigeria. You can find that easily from government data that's on the internet. You can find information in terms of poverty level in Nigeria. You can find that on the internet from organizations like World Health Organization. So there's really a whole lot of information, a whole lot of statistics that are out there. You can find all of that on the internet today. Okay, so good answer. Now, Wisdom, I have a question for you. In your report, which organization do you report for, by the way? Wisdom?
I can hear you, sir. I can hear you.
Yeah. Which organization do you report for?
I don't report for any organization, sir.
Okay. So you're just entering into journalism, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, what are your plans for the future? Like, what do you plan to do? Do you plan to report for, say, a newspaper house or for a broadcasting station? What are your plans? What are your dreams?
So first of all, I just want to intern for a while, and that's why I joined this course. So I would like to intern for a while to gain valuable experience, first of all. Then after a while, I hope to work maybe as a sports journalist for a while. Then I think I'll branch out. Maybe I'll start a podcast after I've created and online and maybe a presence in the media world. So I'll start maybe a podcast and we'll see how it goes from there.
Okay, good. But why are you interested in sports? Why not politics? Why not some other area?
Oh,
why sports?
Well, I actually, not just sports. That's why I said I'll branch out
okay.
the podcast sometime, because I want to talk about other things like general issues, like politics, like entertainment. I just want the freedom. But first of all, I know I have to go through certain steps to get to a certain level before I can be able to have a good enough presence online and in the public in general.
Okay. All right, great. Now, does anyone have any question for me? It doesn't have to be on this lecture, on the thing that I lectured on, but any other thing that you may want to know about the profession, or even what I do in terms of my general work, or the kinds of things that I've reported on previously. Okay, let's start from Joshua.
Thank you very much, sir. My question is, from the beginning, we were told you are into academic reports, that you do academic journals. I'd want to know what area of academic journals you are into, and if I could make contributions.
Okay, now here's the thing. The academic journals, what they mean by academic journals is that it's not like media reporting. It's very, very different. This really, for you to publish in the academic journals, what it means is that you do research, and then that's academic type research. And then we normally send it out to blind reviewers. Well, let me just describe my job, first of all. I sit as editor for a journal that is called the Howard Journal of Communications. Then I also sit on the board for Communication and Sports Journal. What happens here is that people who are in the academy, that is like professors and so on, they would go and do research, and then they would send it to us. And if it comes to me as editor, they have to send it to me blind. What it means is that there is no name attached to it. And when there is no name attached to it, I can then send it out to reviewers. Reviewers are their colleagues who are at other colleges, who are professors, who are experts in the area in which they did research. These people, usually about 3 of them in number, they will review those articles, and then they will critique those articles and make suggestions for changes. And in the years that I've been editor for, I believe I've been editor now for more than 5 years, no articles been sent to us that we publish right away. All articles, we send it back to the author and ask them for revision. That's the way the academy works. And the reason why it works like that is they are blind, because essentially people who are reviewing it, other professors, do not know who's written the article. And the person who's reading the article does not know who's reviewing the article. This is to make sure that the research is at a high level. So sometimes it goes on that about 2 or 3 revisions before I would then accept it. And my accepting an article really depends on the advice that I get from the reviewers, the reviewers that I put on the article. If I have a majority of them that tell me, hey, we think this manuscript is good, you should go ahead and accept it, then I would accept it. And if there are changes to be made, I would ask the author to make the changes. If there are not, then I would accept it and then have it published in the journal. So that's how the academic journals work, which is slightly different from writing in a sports.
Okay, sir. Now, I actually get an overview of what you're saying. I actually work with someone who is into biodiversity.
Okay.
Now, would such papers be accepted for review?
Yes, it would, but it might not be in the journal that I edit, because the journal I edit would accept only pieces that focus on specifically on communication and that it affects Black people. But in terms of biodiversity, that's really a new area, and there are several journals that deal with that. So it would be something that those journals will accept to review.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Who else? Okay, Tamara Tonya, you had a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, I wanted to ask, you said we can use data to enhance our articles. So I want to know, how do you present statistics in a way that it is entertaining or appealing to the audience? Because I know a lot of people who, when they see an article that has a lot of stats, statistics, they just get bored immediately and they want to skip through it. They don't even want to read it. I can be like that sometimes too if the statistics are too many. So I want to know, how can you make it interesting for the reader?
There are various ways you can do that, but in terms of including stats, you always include them as links. So sometimes people might not even click at the link. They read the main article, like the article that we showed. So if they're interested in something that digs deep into stats, then they can click there and read that aspect of it. But in terms of stats, there are various ways that you can make it interesting. You can make them interesting by providing graphs and so on. And these graphs really would get to the meat of the thing, the message that you want to send. So that's one way to make stats interesting so that they're not just numbers. Because I agree with you, there are a lot of people that would get bored if it was just numbers that are being provided out there. But we can make those numbers interesting by using graphs. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Samuel, you're next. Samuel?
All right. Good evening, sir. Thank you, sir. I've really learned a lot this evening. My question is, as a beginner, what was your most difficult experience that you encountered when you started new? Thank you.
That is starting new in the journalism field or in their academic field?
Yes, in the journalism field, please. What are the difficult experiences you encountered?
Okay. Now, my experience with journalism was actually in Nigeria. I had finished from University of Nigeria in Nsukka. This is a long time ago, I'm pretty sure before many of you were born. I had finished from University of Nigeria in 1981. That's a long time ago. And at that time, getting a full-time job as a journalist was the most difficult thing in Nigeria. So what I did was to freelance. I freelanced primarily for a newspaper that no longer exists today. That newspaper was called the Satellite newspaper. That newspaper was owned by the former governor of Anambra State. Then that was Jim Wobodo. He owned that newspaper that's called the Satellite. So I freelanced as a sports journalist for them and covered like the African Cup of Nations as well as different things. And at that time, I had none of this stuff. I had no knowledge of a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about today. The thing that I'm talking about today are things that I learned later from working in the academy. So the hardest thing for me, to be direct in terms of your question, was actually getting a job, a full-time job within the journalism field. But the reporting itself was easy for me at that time because I also had sources. For instance, during that time, apart from reporting for the Cup of Nations, I had my sources in Enugu Rangers camp. I had sources in then P&T Vasco da Gama that existed. Then I had sources there. And in fact, I reported on several controversial issues during my time. And one of them almost led to some legal issues, but I was ready because I had everything really taped. And that report was, there was a corruption issue that affected Vasco da Gama, in which some players had taken money to throw a game, and I reported that fact. And the P&T officials weren't happy about it, and they threatened court. So I told them you could go to court because I had the information and I had my sources and I had it taped, and they never went to court. But those were the things that I encountered at that time. Okay. Do we have any other question here? Any other question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. So it's quite an interesting lecture, I must say. My question borders around Nigerian government and the usage of statistics. I think there's actually a board or a ministry of of statistics and all of it. So I'm wondering why is it that the government does not adhere to the statistics that is being put out there? Presently, we are having issues even with our population. We're not very sure of our numbers, hovering between 190, some say 200 million Nigerians and all of that. So how do we ensure that with the usage of data and statistics, we'll be able to advance the frontiers of the economy, agriculture, and different sector of this nation to our benefit? Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. I think you raise an issue, but I will point out that that issue is not specific to Nigeria. It's all over the world in terms of how do we trust the numbers that are being issued by states. By states, I mean like governments. That's a big problem. But one of the things we have to note is that population figures are not just in Nigeria, but all over the world are based sometimes on estimates, which means that they are not entirely accurate. However, because they are estimates and projections, we should have some faith on it because the governments base their activities on those numbers. So that's one of the things that we have to deal with. It's a worldwide situation. I think for you as media persons, one of the things that you should focus on is if the government is issuing these stats and they are supposed to be working based on those stats, then you can call them on it. Meaning, hey, this is the stats that your statistical office is providing. How have you used those numbers in terms of the work that you're doing? These are some of the things the journalists can call attention to. So, Mike, I'm not sure that I answered all the questions. If I missed something, just repeat that question so that I make sure that I answer them entirely.
No, it's okay, sir. I'm comfortable with your response. I just have follow-up to that in line with what you have said. Presently, the Freedom of Information Bill has not been passed by the government. So there are chances that when you want to go get information from different government sectors that regards to stats and numbers, they are not readily forthcoming with those informations. In such cases, what do you do? How do you go about it?
Okay, very, very good question. Really, I think that's an outstanding question, a very, very important question. Freedom of information, even if it is passed, I can guarantee even if it passes today, it doesn't assure you that you're going to get it. In the United States, there is freedom of information, but you have to file papers to get it, and the governments here try to delay and put all kinds of obstacles to it, but the journalists persist. They would eventually get it, and sometimes they might in fact go to court to ensure that the government releases that information. So passing the act itself in Nigeria does not assure anything. It just makes it a little bit easier to get the information. Now, the question about this with the Nigerian situation is that sometimes there are ways that you can get around this, with or without that act being passed. One is that you have sources within the government who, for one reason or the other, they may have personal reasons where they're going to give you that information, but they would want to be unnamed in the stories. As long as you can vouch for that source and the information they are giving to you that you are able to clarify that is credible information, you can use it without revealing the source, as you know. That's one way. But the other thing also is that a lot of statistics that we are talking about, you can actually obtain it. They exist today over the internet. You don't even need to go to the government to do it. There's a lot of statistics from Nigeria that's being kept, not only by Nigerian government, that is accessible to all of you here. If you go on the internet right after this class, you would get that information. So it's there. The other one, for example, population figures, it's there. Number of children, it's there. Number of people with birth certificates in Nigeria, it's there. Number of people without birth certificates in Nigeria, it's there. All of that is on the internet as we speak. So you don't need to go to a government office to get it because it's already free on the internet. A lot of the stats that we are talking about. But even beyond the Nigerian government, there are many international organizations, World Health Organization, WHO, UNESCO, all these, the United Nations, and all its agencies, the African agencies as well, that keep a lot of information on different countries in the world, including Nigeria. You can also go to their site to generate information that you can also use to build up your stories. Okay. Questions? Any other question? If there are no other questions, I think it's about time that we call it a day. Let me just say, before I call it a day, I've enjoyed the session. Personally, I've enjoyed it. I mean, whenever I get an opportunity like this to be able to speak to Nigerians, particularly young Nigerians, like I'm speaking to today, to be able to have a session with them to talk about things, I am extremely glad to do so. And I say so because I believe that you guys represent the future of Nigeria. And make no mistake about it, the information that's available to you today is the information that has never been available to people older than you. Your parents, people my age, we never have had access to the amount of information that you have. So I think that you guys represent the future of Nigeria. It's a powerful future. You guys can change the way you present your reports so that other people who are Nigerians and people outside can gain a lot more information about what you're writing. So I think that that is something that you guys can really utilize and take advantage of that. It's a great period to be alive in terms of your age group, to be able to have access to all of that. And by that, I say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to speak to you today. And I wish each and every one of you success going forward.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Personally, this has been one of the best lectures I've had so far. It was interactive and I got to understand a lot of things. And I can't wait to put all of these teachings into practice. So thank you so much, sir. We're so grateful.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
All right, sir. Goodbye, sir.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Okay, our lecturer has left. Please, we know the drill. We're to send for the new persons, Mr. Kayode, this is your first Zoom class with us. We send lessons learned, yeah, after every class, we send it to the group. It's like an assignment. So after every class, we are required to put down a list of everything that we've learned so far and then send to the group. Yeah, it was nice having you guys. Take care. We'll see you again in the next class. I'm ending this meeting now. Bye.